Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 610 likes on this one. Of course, only if you feel this video is deserving of it. Don't just drop a like because I asked. I want to know that you actually enjoyed the video. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this every 5 days. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a wonderful night. I suppose my grandfather had eccentric tastes. The place he called home near the end of his life was a somewhat disturbing property that would surely freak out most people. It was a former insane asylum. Despite its off-putting past, he talked about it like it was the most luxurious mansion you could imagine. Instead of being creeped out by it, he was proud to own such a historic old building. He bought it for a very good price, but spent quite a bit on restorations. When he passed away, I was stunned to discover that he left the building to me. A few members of the family were a bit insulted that he gave it to me over them, but most were so unsettled by the place that they didn't mind. I guess I really was his favorite granddaughter. I drove up one day to take a look at the place, tour the building, and decide what I was going to do about the fact that it had recently come into my ownership. At first, I thought there was no way I'd ever actually move in. Arriving at the property, I was confronted with the sandstone monstrosity. The building was tall, towering over the landscape, with ornate windows and Gothic architecture. There was a circular water fountain in front and a large clock tower at the entrance. Inside, there were several long and empty hallways. My grandfather had renovated the opening interior room into a living room and had rearranged things quite a bit. He had changed the doctors' and nurses' areas into his lavish bedroom and guest rooms. The kitchen was fully redesigned with expensive granite countertops. In one room there was even a pool hall. He had really turned this grim asylum into his own personal manor. I was somewhat impressed. At the time, I still lived in a cramped apartment, so this was certainly an upgrade as far as space was concerned. I was pretty hesitant, but eventually, I decided to sell my apartment and move in. It might be a bit creepy, but it was much nicer than the place I had been staying, and there was no way I could pass up on all that space. It's not wise to look a gift horse in the mouth, I suppose. It took some time to get used to it, and heating the place was a nightmare. Whenever I'd walk through the hallway, it'd be freezing cold. However, the bedrooms and other rooms I could heat with fireplaces and heaters. After a while, I stopped seeing it as an asylum and saw it more and more as just a nice house that my loving grandfather had graciously given to me. I was appreciative. The next part is a bit difficult to describe, but I guess it's relevant. I've had mental health issues all my life, on and off. They tend to get worse during periods of high stress, and shortly after my move, I started having a lot of issues at my job and with a few of my relationships. I became very paranoid as a result. I was convinced that someone was poisoning my food, even when I was self-aware enough to know that it wasn't true. It still bothered me and kept me from eating for several days. I felt I was having some sort of psychotic breakdown. Eventually, I sought psychiatric help, and after much assessment, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I didn't have any auditory or visual hallucinations, and with the aid of therapy and medication, I was able to keep my symptoms in check and manage it. The irony of living in a former insane asylum at the time wasn't lost on me. My friends morbidly joked that maybe the building was what did it somehow. But of course, I'd had a history of such mental health problems all throughout my life. Thankfully, this was the 21st century, and I was able to receive proper treatment, unlike many of the poor folks who lived their lives in the former asylum that I then called home. It was also a less taboo subject, something to be discussed more openly, instead of locked away behind the gates of hellscapes like an insane asylum. Patients were once stored away from society like a dirty secret, and subjected to what would now be seen as horrible medicalized mistreatment. This grim history was all around me, and only drove home the point for me what progress we had made as a society, and how grateful I was for it. Then something most peculiar happened. One night I was heading to the kitchen to get a midnight snack. I had a blanket wrapped around me whilst traveling through the cold hallways. While making my way there, I noticed some unsettling movement in the distance. The hallway I was in had tall wooden doors along either side, with each one leading to a small room that the patients once stayed in. When I looked towards the source of the noise, I saw a human figure walking out of an open door. The figure moved down the hallway before disappearing through another open door further down. The figure was as plain as day, a person standing there, like you or me, not transparent like a specter in a movie. It was an eerie woman wearing an old-fashioned white nurse outfit. She looked like something out of an old black and white photo. I felt the threatening feeling that a mysterious stranger was in my house. I stopped dead in my tracks. The mind is a weird thing, and can play tricks on you. I would know that more than most. At first, I took what I was seeing at face value, but when I thought more about it, I wondered if it could be a product of my mental illness. I'd never had visual hallucinations before, and I'd been taking my medication. Could I really be seeing this? I thought. Cautiously, I took a few steps forward in the cold, dark corridor. As if on cue, the nurse emerged from the door at the end of the long hallway. This time, however, she turned and faced towards me, staring blankly. Her piercing dark eyes gazed into me. This made my skin crawl. The woman's uniform was a white dress, shoes, and hat. Her skin was ghostly pale. Her short hair was dark brunette. She looked at me for quite a while before a wicked smile began to slowly appear on her face. We both stood transfixed, staring at one another for a moment. Something about the way she was looking at me was very sinister and intimidating. She appeared to be holding an odd, shiny silver medical instrument in her hand, but I couldn't see what it was. The nurse then began walking towards me. In a panic, I ran back into my room and slammed the door. I stayed awake all night. There was no way I was sleeping after that. I waited for daylight. In the morning, I nervously peered out the door but saw nothing. It took hours to gain the courage to investigate the hallway in the daylight, only to find absolutely nothing. No one was there. After that horrible night, I started storing snacks in my room to avoid the empty hallways where I saw the nurse. I still wasn't sure what she was. Given the history of the building, I thought she might be a ghost, but with my recent mental health crisis, there's no way I could be sure. One morning I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom mirror, trying not to think about what I'd been going through. I suddenly got the uncomfortable feeling that I was being watched. In the mirror, I saw the haunting figure gradually appear behind me out of nothing. With sudden alarm, I dropped my toothbrush and turned around to look, but she was gone. That's when I became really convinced that what I was seeing was a spirit of some kind, but that conviction was hard to hold on to as the days went by. I couldn't trust my own mind to be giving me accurate information on what I was seeing. I just didn't know if this was part of my condition somehow worsening or not. I wasn't sure which answer was more frightening, that my illness now resulted in vivid hallucinations, or that an asylum spirit was pursuing me. Then I started seeing her during the daytime more and more. Sometimes it'd be just for a moment and out of the corner of my eye. Other times I'd see the ghostly nurse going in and out of rooms doing her busy work. She always seemed to catch me off guard. I started closing all the doors, but somehow I'd find them inexplicably open again. The door physically moved. That couldn't be the result of a mental health issue, I thought. Then again, maybe I didn't actually close the doors, but just tricked myself into believing I did. Sometimes late at night when I was getting ready for bed, I'd hear the sound of her nurse shoes walking on the tile flooring out in the hallway. I'd shudder as she drew closer and closer. If she was a spirit, I wondered what she wanted from me. After weeks of being plagued by her mysterious and threatening presence, I decided I had to see my doctor and tell him about this. I told him that I'd been experiencing what I believed to be visual hallucinations. He increased the dosage of my medication in hopes that would help. It didn't. I continued to see the ghostly woman in the hallways or throughout the building as I tried to focus on my daily life. I'd see her again and again. She just wouldn't go away. Nothing could make her leave. I'd yell out to her in empty rooms, asking her what she wanted from me, or pleading with her to please stop and leave me alone in peace. She made no reply. Then one night, as I was sleeping, I grew restless and began to toss and turn. Suddenly I found myself awake in the dark room. My eyes strained in the darkness until I could make out what I was seeing. My bedroom door, which I had locked, was wide open. The nurse was standing at the foot of my bed looking at me as if I was a patient in her care. Terrified, I screamed, threw the blankets off of me, and ran out of the room. I made my way alone through the chilly hallways to the kitchen and flicked the light on. I stayed in the kitchen all night, guarding the door and looking around the room nervously, waiting for her to spontaneously appear somewhere. I knew I locked that door. With my dosage already increased, any notion that this was a product of my mental illness went right out the window for me. I needed to research the property more to see if there was any way to figure out what I was dealing with. I knew my grandfather had a binder of information he'd collected on the old asylum. He'd mentioned it to me before. I just needed to find it. I spent the day digging through storage until I finally uncovered it in an old tote at the very bottom of a stack of cardboard boxes. The binder was full of newspaper clippings and documents about the place, from the time it was being built until the time it was closed down and sold. There were even letters and correspondence between staff within its pages. I learned about the grisly history of the asylum and about the poor treatment and dehumanization of the patients there. In order to calm patients down, sometimes they'd put them in ice baths, which were tubs filled with ice to get them to calm down. They also did electroshock therapy on supposedly unruly patients. But the worst of it all was the many horrific transorbial lobotomies, which were done with tools resembling an ice pick and hammer. Lobotomies were once considered a helpful form of treatment from various mental illnesses including schizophrenia, OCD, depression, anxiety, and violent outbursts. Sometimes the patient's relatives just simply didn't want to deal with them for whatever reason, and so they had them committed or lobotomized. Anyone deemed abnormal was at risk. Sometimes this was an easy way for a husband to get rid of his former wife. The procedure essentially resulted in permanent brain damage to the prefrontal cortex and left the patient as a zombified shell of their former self. A steel ice pick was stabbed just below the eyelid into the thin bone inside the eye socket. The end of the long silver ice pick would then be struck with a small medical hammer until the pick cut into the brain tissue. The pick was then moved around from side to side until it severed the frontal lobe's connection to the thalamus. Their personality, their self, and their ability to make rational decisions were forever destroyed. Sometimes the patients were wide awake during these procedures, and sometimes they died from brain bleeding. The patients were left with vacant expressions and severely blunted or reduced emotions. The doctors found them to be more obedient and claimed to have fewer issues from them. Lobotomies continued in the medical field until around the late 1960s. It was perhaps the worst thing you could do to someone, like killing them, but without killing them. I soon learned there was a nurse there who was legendary for the amount of lobotomies she'd given. Her name was Amelia, and if the letters are to be believed, she was not the nicest of people. I was horrified when I turned the page and was met with a photo of the very specter that had been haunting me, standing outside on the building's front steps with the other nurses. Looking into her dark, hateful eyes, I was sure it was her. Every detail matched. The spirit I'd encountered was the cruel nurse Amelia, who worked here in the early part of the 20th century. Not wanting to be alone, or in the building at all after reading that, I asked a close friend of mine if I could come over to her place. I explained some of what I was going through to the extent that I could without seeming too off-kilter. Being a true friend, she agreed that I could stay over for tonight so I wouldn't be so frightened. I wondered how expensive a long hotel stay would be, until I could find somewhere else to live. I arrived at her house and we talked in the living room for a while. I showed her the binder and told her about what I was experiencing. It was nice to have someone to talk to, and she made me feel much more comfortable. Getting out of that depressing asylum certainly put me in a better spirit as well. Saying all of the story out loud to another person, I began to doubt myself a bit. It all sounded too unbelievable to be true. Suddenly my friend asked, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely. We both then heard the sound of shoes on hard tiling. It was coming from the hallway leading to my friend's bedroom. She got up to investigate, and I cautiously followed close behind her. Staring down the hallway, we both saw the ghostly figure of a dark-haired nurse. "You see what I see, right?" I asked. My friend, unable to form words, nodded. In the nurse's hands, she held a silver ice pick and hammer. Nurse Amelia just looked at me and smiled a foreboding smile. In that moment, I saw that my worst fears were justified, and there was no longer any ambiguity. I knew then what her intentions were for me, and I knew that I wouldn't be rid of her. She must have overheard me mention something about my diagnosis while I was living in the former asylum. She knew about my condition, and she intended to use her tools to fix it, the old-fashioned way. I'm not exactly sure where to turn with this. Paranormal forums have been no help in most places on the internet. Just start talking about salt, iron, and calling Sam and Dean to fix the issue. This is real though, and it's getting worse. And I'm terrified. About a week ago I came home late from work at my usual time. I usually get off around 10:30, and my roommate Jackson works pretty early, so it's not uncommon to see him passed out on the couch. That night, though, he was wide awake, sitting and watching a scary movie with the lights off. I greeted him and tossed my keys on the table, But as I went to reach for the light, he turned and yelled at me, "Leave it off." I jumped back, startled. "What's wrong with you, man?" "Sorry." He settled back on the couch, his eyes turning towards the screen again. "We're just trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie." I looked around and didn't see anyone else in the room. Tension filled the air. "Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket?" I joked, hoping to lighten things and make it feel normal again. Instead, he turned to me with wide, glassy eyes and corrected himself. "Me? I'm trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie." He slowly turned his head back towards the screen where some masked killer was stalking his victim. A combination of the intensity in his eyes, the dark room, the scary movie, and the way he'd reacted to my arrival sent a shiver up my spine and put a sick feeling in my stomach. "Whatever, man." I tried to shake it off. "See you in the morning." I walked away towards my room, but he didn't respond. His eyes glued on the screen as he silently watched the movie with a stiff-backed posture. I turned back to him one last time before I shut my door, and I could swear I saw something out of the corner of my eye standing next to the couch. I did a double take and it was gone. Instead, I noticed Jackson had turned his head toward me. His eyes were still glassy, and his mouth stretched itself into a toothy smile. I quickly shut my bedroom door and locked it. I flicked on my TV and put on some random YouTube videos to hopefully distract me from what I just saw. Was he messing with me? Trying to scare me? What just happened? Jackson had always been a bit of a prankster. One time he hid the vacuum in my room and set it up to an electrical switch on a timer. The thing went off at 3 in the morning and scared the heck out of me. That was funny though. This was not. I spent the rest of the night laying in bed and staring at my TV with his bizarre smile imprinted on my brain. I thought about getting up and confronting him, but before I knew it, I heard the TV shut off in the living room and him go to his room and close the door. Any expectation I had of him coming to my door, knocking, apologizing, and explaining what the heck just happened died. Instead, I decided to try and get some sleep and ask him in the morning. Sure, it was weird, and yes, it creeped me out, but at the time, I didn't realize I was living in what would become a nightmare, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt and shrugged it off. I can hear you wondering why I didn't just book it out right then and there, but the guy had been my roommate for 3 years with barely any issue. He was a nice dude with no history of anything weird, as far as I knew, and it was much easier to assume it was a strange night, and my eyes and brain were playing tricks on me after a long night of work. I convinced myself it was a badly timed joke on his part, and in time, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to find Jackson sitting at the kitchen table, eating a bowl of cereal and scrolling on his phone. I could smell coffee brewing on the pot. "Morning, dude," he said in his typical cheerful tone, not looking up from his breakfast. "Made coffee. Help yourself." "Morning." I side-eyed him as I walked through the kitchen, and finally he caught my gaze. "What?" He shot me a confused look and shrugged his shoulders as he spooned some more cereal into his mouth. "Last night, dude. Not funny." I couldn't believe he was playing stupid with me. "You actually freaked me out." He laughed and shook his head. "Sorry, man. I was just messing with you. I guess the horror movie put me in a mood." I actually remember breathing a sigh of relief. I had figured he was messing with me, but hearing it confirmed made me feel a lot better. "I don't mind a prank now and then, man. Just save it for when I'm not exhausted." I poured myself some coffee and started heading back towards my room to try and relax during my day off. "You got it, brother." He raised his bowl to me in a cheers and smiled a normal smile, but as I walked away, I heard his tone change and lower to be almost imperceptible. He spoke words that once again filled my gut with ice. "We'll try to be more considerate next time." "What did you just say?" I turned to him again. "Me," he said with a mouthful of cereal. "Nothing." "You definitely said something," I insisted. "Dude, you're being weird." He got up and put his now empty bowl in the sink. "Listen, I'm sorry I messed with you last night. I promise I didn't say anything, though." Again, I know what I heard, but he was convincing. It was easy to trick myself into thinking I was psyching myself out. There was no reason the guy would be gaslighting me. At worst, he was just messing with me, and if I told myself I just needed to let go, everything would be normal again. "I guess I'm just still tired and a little tweaked out from last night," I said to him. I sipped my coffee and headed towards my room again. "Sorry, man." "No worries," he said, heading towards his room as well. "Sorry I tweaked you with my joke." I thought that would be that, but 2 nights later, things got way worse. I woke up at about 1:30 to the sound of scratching at my door. It was like a dog begging to be let in, despite the fact that neither Jackson or I have a dog. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and stared at the door with an intense focus. The sound continued. Small scratches, short and quick. It made me think a bit of scurrying rats gnawing on support beams in the walls. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and got closer to the door. I pressed my ear to the wood and could feel vibrations of whatever was scratching on the other side. "Jackson?" I called out, unsure if I was expecting a response. "What's up, man?" I heard him right away, but not next to my door. He sounded like he was in the living room. I flung the door open to nothing. Moonlight crept in through the window and cast an eerie blue over the apartment, but Jackson wasn't there. No rat, no dog, no roommate. Nothing to have made the noise, and no one to have called back to me. Maybe I should have been scared, but honestly, I was irritated. He was still trying to mess with me, and I just wasn't in the mood. I walked across the hall to his door and knocked on it aggressively. "Jack," I almost shouted, but thought better. I kept my tone firm and knocked again. "Jack, what are you doing, man?" Silence. I pressed my ear against his door. "Jack?" I said again in a softer tone. He didn't respond. I tried his knob, and his door wasn't locked. As I turned the handle, this creeping dread filled me that something awful was waiting for me on the other side of that door. "Hey man, are you alright in there?" I slowly pushed the door open, and as the door slowly came into view, I saw Jackson sitting on his bed with his back to me. His posture was stiff like before while he was watching the movie. Hands on his knees, his body still as a statue. "Dude, what the..." My words caught in my throat as the rest of the room came into view. I still can't fully believe what I saw standing there. A figure stood next to Jack. Tall. I would guess almost 7 feet. A sheet was draped over it like an old ghost costume, but without the eye holes. Just a white sheet with what looked to be a person underneath. "I'm fine," Jackson spoke, but not alone. The thing underneath the sheet spoke with him in unison, its gravelly, rotten voice tangled with his. "I'm just hanging out with my new friend." I almost screamed, but I was so scared that at that moment I was frozen in place. Something about this made me realize this was no joke. The thing under the sheet gave off the worst air of danger I'd ever felt in my life, like staring down the barrel of a gun. "He came knocking the other night." They both spoke. The thing just a half second before Jack, though, like it was guiding his voice. I let him in. He likes it here. So warm and inviting. I backed away slowly. A terror filled me and told me to flee. I felt like if I ran, it would chase me, like locking eyes with a predator in the wild. We can all be friends now. The best of friends. Jackson says you're easy to scare. It was speaking alone now. Show me. With that, it moved across the room, and then it was directly in front of me. It didn't walk or run. It was like it fast-forwarded. Startled, I stumbled backwards and into the wall behind me, cracking my head on a framed picture. I scrambled to my feet and looked up. Jackson was once again wearing that stiff smile and standing next to this thing. This intruder. Come on, brother, they said together. Let's all watch something scary. The sheet lifted ever so slightly, and a gaunt gray arm slid from underneath. Thin, bony fingers reached for me and snagged the collar of my shirt as I attempted to bolt down the hall and to the front door. I heard the fabric rip as I tore myself free and sprinted to the exit. We can all live here together. No need to run. The voice got muddier, uglier. It sounded like it was underwater and distorted, shredded vocal cords. I flung open the door and flew into the hallway. The hall lights burned my eyes for a second as I ran to the stairs. All around me, at every apartment door I heard knocking as I tore my way down the hallway. I saw some people opening their doors to find out what was going on. Each of them went blank as soon as they did. I watched some of them fling the door open, ready to scream at whoever was knocking so late, but their expression dropped and their eyes went as glassy as Jack's. I jumped down, skipping 3 to 4 steps at a time, my bare feet slapping against the cold vinyl floors of the building's hallways. More and more doors opened, people standing frozen at the threshold and those tall sheet-covered entities standing next to them. Some were guiding them back to their homes. Some just watched me as I moved as quickly as I could down the hall. I burst out through the front door into the warm night air. I must have ran 3 or 4 blocks before the realization hit me that I was in my pajama pants. No phone, no wallet, no keys, no shoes, and no idea what to do. I ended up finding an all-night diner that let me use their phone. I thought about calling the cops, but what do I say? Ghosts have taken over my apartment building, and the residents are hypnotized? Possessed? Nothing I could say wouldn't sound insane. I would get treated like a crackpot. I called my sister. I wasn't sure what to say to her. I told her something was wrong with Jackson. He was acting crazy, and I was not comfortable staying in the apartment anymore. I've been here for 3 days now. I don't know what to do anymore. At the urging of my sister, I called the police to at least do a wellness check on Jackson. I was terrified of sending anyone to that apartment building, but they told us they checked on him and everything seemed fine. He answered all their questions normally. Told them he had pulled a bad joke on me, and he was okay. This was not a joke, and I feel like I'm going crazy. My sister Ashley and her husband are urging me to just go home and talk it out with him, or at least get my things. I don't know what to do though. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but what happened to me and my girlfriend on that road trip, something changed. It's taken me a while to gather the courage to write this, and even now I can feel its eyes on me sometimes as I type. I've only been able to get a paragraph or two before I stop, but someone has to know. I've always despised long car trips. The fact wasn't lost on me when my girlfriend at the time, with the help of her parents, took it upon herself to fund a trip overseas to the USA, our own Great Western Trail. She conveniently forgot that she didn't have a license, leaving me as the sole driver. I grumbled, but a lot of money had been spent and given to us to do with as we pleased. I wasn't going to spoil this. It was our reward for successfully graduating from university. The trip wasn't particularly memorable. When I think back on it, I struggle to recall most of the places we stayed. I remember landing in New York, spending a few days seeing the popular sights, and then renting a car and just driving. We had no real plan. With plenty of money, we could stay wherever we wanted. We had a few destinations in mind, but most of my checklist was on the West Coast. San Francisco and Vegas were still ahead, so driving was inevitable. We'd pick a highway or back road and drive until I needed a break. Even though I found it tedious, Megan's company was comforting, though the ride would grow silent when she slept. The monotony of towering trees, sprawling plains, and endless fields played tricks on my mind. The persistent rumble of the wheels and the silent, stagnant air punctuated only by the hum of the engine added to the oppressive sameness. This was the aspect of driving that I loathed. Only the occasionally passing street signs provided any change, offering glimpses of nearby towns or warnings of local wildlife. After 8 hours of uninterrupted driving one day, I hadn't encountered a single town or city. Normally, I'd pass through 3 or 4 in a day's journey, but this time, the landscape remained stubbornly unpopulated. Yawning through my 3rd can of Red Bull, I considered pulling over in the middle of nowhere to catch some sleep. Then, just as the fuel alarm blinked to life, a weathered sign appeared, almost too late, making the turnoff to a town. There was a subtle unease as I veered onto the exit. It struck me as odd that I could not recall any prior signs, yet the promise of fuel and a potential resting place outweighed my apprehension. The indicator ticking, the steering wheel turning, and Megan stirring beside me, I guided the car towards a place named Graysall. As the sun began its descent beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty fuel station, Megan and I pulled in, grateful for a chance to stretch our legs. The flickering fluorescent lights above hummed intermittently, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the isolated place. "We'll fill up here," I said, cutting the engine. Megan nodded, glancing around at the quiet surroundings. "And where is here?" she muttered. "A possible place to sleep?" I stepped out of the car into the cool evening air, the scent of petrol and dust lingering. The station was deserted, except for a lone figure behind the counter, engrossed in a magazine. I pushed open the creaking door and entered, a small bell chiming softly. The service worker looked up, a slight smile spreading across his young face as he greeted me with a nod. "Evening," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty convenience store. The worker stared at me, his smile showing teeth slightly. "Just the gas today?" he said, a slight jubilation in his voice. "Yeah, thanks," I replied absent-mindedly, pulling out some cash. "Cash all good?" "Of course." His reply was almost a little too enthusiastic, lingering on the R. I handed him the cash and took my change. His smile widened. "Have a great day, sir." "Yeah, thanks." I replied, turning away. Have a great day, sir. I paused, turned, and looked at the man again. His smile remained, showing all his teeth. The gnawing part was that he seemed unhappy. Not the soul-crushing service kind of unhappy, but there was something in his eyes. I couldn't quite describe it. Have a great day, sir. He punctuated each word, eyes locked on mine. I will, thank you. With a ring of the bell, I walked out the door, still feeling his gaze on me. His smile never wavered. As I fueled the car, I glanced back into the store. He was staring at me. I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying behind his gritted teeth, but that smile remained burned into my mind. Getting back in the car, I shook myself. I was more than a little on edge. You okay, babe? Megan asked. I started up the car before pulling away. That was a chilling experience, I said with a forced laugh that even I didn't believe. How so? That guy was just creepy. No wonder he's out here at the station. There was a pause. Sure, Megan replied. Leaving the gas station behind, we ventured deeper into Graysall, a town seemingly caught in a perpetual state of half-hearted development. Quaint shops with faded facades lined the main street, their windows showcasing dusty displays of antiques and local crafts. A solitary traffic light flickered intermittently, casting an unsettling glow over cracked sidewalks and neglected flower beds. The road less traveled, Megan remarked, peering out the window. This truly is the explorer's way. Yeah, a strange vibe, I agreed, my thoughts still lingering on the encounter with the service worker. As we drove further, we passed a weathered sign promising accommodations ahead. Following its directions, we found ourselves at a modest motel inside town. The car park was empty except for a few cars, their owners unseen in the fading light of dusk. I guess this will do for the night, I said, pulling into a parking space. Stepping out of the car, we were met with curious glances from the sparse population, their greeting smiles short, but their stares lingering a little too long. The motel seemed to stand in silent anticipation, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the growing darkness. I leaned in close and whispered to Megan, "What's with the looks?" She glanced at me, brushing off my concern. "It's a small town," she replied in a normal tone. "We're tourists in a backwater town. Of course we're going to get looks." After locking the car doors, we walked towards the somewhat inviting light of the lobby. Just as I approached the door with Megan in the lead, I paused and glanced over my shoulder. There was a whisper on the wind, a fleeting sound or thought. The caffeine was wearing off, and with a violent shake of my head, I dismissed it and entered the cramped lobby. "Hello there, dears." The wizened caretaker woman creaked, her smile forming like cracks on old porcelain. "A room for the two of you?" Megan smiled back brightly. "Yes, just for the night, please. One double bed." The woman nodded in acceptance and wrote down our details in a dusty ledger. As I glanced at the ledger, it seemed unusually sparse, lacking additional names or reservations. "A couple's room. Names, please." "I'm Megan, and this is Michael." Megan and Michael. I do like the letter M. A chuckle rattled through her, revealing teeth that seemed too white against weathered skin. Megan shifted slightly, her gaze wandering around the lobby with a casual interest. "And where are you off to?" Megan stepped closer to respond, but I cut in with my question. "We're just travelers. How much for the room?" Her grin widened. $40 for the room. She offered the key to us, seemingly pulling it from thin air. "Thank you," I said, taking it cautiously. Leaning against the counter, I counted out the notes before passing the key to Megan. "Is there a place to eat around here?" I asked, handing over the money. "Eat?" She seemed surprised. "Best not to linger when it gets dark. There's a vending machine with snacks. I'm sure you'll be okay." I glanced outside. Darkness had fallen swiftly, cloaking the town like a shroud. "Okay?" I nodded. The woman took the money. "Have a great day, sir." "Sure." I turned to step away, but her grip suddenly tightened on my wrist, making me look back. Her eyes pleaded, and her teeth gleamed brightly as her smile stretched her wrinkled skin. I stood there in confusion as her grip tightened. "Have a great day, sir." I was shocked by her sudden strength and didn't move. Megan intervened smoothly. "Good night, ma'am." Her tone was breezy. The grip released as suddenly as it had tightened. Megan was next to me with a cheerful expression. I checked my wrist and looked back at the caretaker. Her smile was still wide, but her mouth was closed. What just happened? Nodding awkwardly, I hurriedly left, my instincts telling me to keep her in sight, but to not turn back. Only when we opened and closed the lobby door did I dare to relax. "She seems nice," Megan remarked, glancing back at the lobby with a dismissive shrug. I huddled close to Megan as we approached our vehicle. "Didn't she seem a bit odd to you?" I asked. She grabbed me, Meg. Like full-on crypt keeper clutched my wrist, I said with a touch of annoyance. "I wouldn't call that a grab. I think she just touched your hand in a friendly way." She laughed as she pulled her suitcase out. "Probably thought you were flirting or something." I wasn't. "Relax, Mike. Older folks can be like that." I wanted to press the issue further, but Megan brushed me off again. Was it just me? Glancing back, I saw the caretaker woman in the distance, appearing to close up shop. She gave us a glance and a smile before hastily dropping the shutters. Shaking off the odd feeling, I turned back to find Megan making her way obviously to the door. I took my bag and followed dutifully. She slid the key into the lock and opened the door effortlessly. Surprisingly, the room appeared to have been recently renovated. There was a modest TV and a large double bed. The calming blue interior was a stark contrast to the worn exterior of the motel. Megan responded with a jump, flopping onto the bed. "Not bad for $40. I smiled at her enthusiasm. "Hungry?" "Not really. Didn't she mention something about the vending machine?" She dug her phone charger out of her bag. "I guess all the local eateries close early due to the small population." That's how I interpreted her warning. I added uncertainty. "Maybe there's a high crime rate." "You think there'd be lots of crime in a place this small?" The sound of her phone accepting charge punctuated her question. "I don't know. Why else would she warn us about going out?" Megan shrugged. "Maybe she's just cautious." I nodded mainly to myself and started towards the bathroom. This place better have running hot water. A shower was a stark contrast to the room. Perhaps they ran out of budget before getting to the tiles and plumbing. At least the light worked, and more importantly, the hot water. I let it steam up before indulging in the warm embrace. My mind wandered, as shower thoughts tend to encourage, lingering on today's drive. I struggled to remember any major landmarks or anything of note. There was nothing. I kept pressing on the thought, all notions of washing myself forgotten. Beneath the roar of the running water, there was another sound. A buzzing, a whisper, a constant tone. I couldn't recall ever hearing it before. As the water began to go cold, a memory resurfaced. I did pass signs on the road, all pointing to Graysall. It made sense, but for 8 hours? The buzz grew louder as I pushed further in my mind. The distance on the signs to Graysall was always the same. It was always the next exit. A loud knock on the bathroom door startled me. "You good?" Megan asked. A shock of cold shivered me awake. I was freezing. "Yeah, I'm good. Be out in a minute." The sudden silence of the room was deafening. I strained to hear the buzz, but there was nothing. I made my way to the mirror, broke open my toiletry bag, and began to brush my teeth. I kept my eyes down towards the sink, focusing on the routine. A nagging feeling in my gut made me hesitate to look up, so I kept my head firmly angled down. With clean teeth, I spat out the toothpaste and looked up out of habit. My reflection stared back at me, but there was something else. I couldn't see it. Behind me were just broken white tiles, but something was there. Dread crept through me as I remained still, locked in a staring contest with my own reflection. I dared not move. The buzzing returned, a presence gripping my very being. It was as if I stood on the edge of a cliff, knowing full well that stepping off would be fatal. I knew that if I glanced slightly to the left of my shoulder, my life would be over. Time passed. I don't know how long before I closed my eyes. The feeling slowly dissipated, and I stepped away from the sink and out the bathroom door into the bedroom. My breath was heavy, buried deep in my stomach. Every movement felt like dragging boulders. Only when I opened my eyes and saw Megan lying casually on the bed with her phone did I let out a shudder of relief. "You were in there a while," she remarked, not looking up. "You'd better get some sleep." "I think so." I made my way to the edge of the bed and climbed in, my neck stiff and taut. I couldn't even glance behind me. Something was there, and I knew it meant the end. Laying on my back, I turned my head toward Megan, a protest forming on my lips. It got stuck in my throat as the oppressive blanket of dread fell over me, digging into my back and spine. I stopped myself as my stomach dropped again. The pits of my being filled with hollow trepidation. The words were stuck in my throat. I wanted to say it, to desperately convey that something was wrong, but terror engulfed me. "What's that, babe?" Megan asked, her tone light. "Nothing. I just need sleep," I muttered in defeat. The feeling receded. The disquieting unease left me. She smiled and gave me a peck on the cheek. "I'll leave you alone tonight so you can rest up. Maybe tomorrow will be better." I could only nod. It felt as if my blood had been drained from my body. Surely. I looked hollow, or my skin void of color, but her reaction remained cheerful and flirty. She turned away, set her phone's alarm for the morning, and nestled into the covers. I did not sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. Time passed in a haze, the seconds blending into minutes, minutes stretching into infinity. My eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the thin curtains, and I began to notice the minute details of the ceiling above me. Tiny cracks splintered across the plaster, the paint already beginning to peel from its fresh coat, revealing faint water stains and the occasional cobweb as a finishing flourish. I could make out the slight variations in texture where the roller marks overlapped during the last haphazard paint job. My mind fixated on these imperfections, a desperate attempt to anchor myself in the mundane. Yet, The oppressive feeling lingered, a weight on my chest. It wasn't as strong as before, but its presence was undeniable. The sense of absoluteness gnawed at me from the left, a silent reminder of whatever unseen horror lay just out of sight. Every instinct boiled over, urging me to keep my gaze forward, to not turn my head even the slightest bit. The thought of what might be there, lurking in the shadows, was too much to bear. My body remained rigid, my breath shallow and controlled, as if any sudden movement or noise might draw its attention. Megan's soft snores provided a fragile comfort. I wanted to wake her, to share the burden, but the words wouldn't come. I was trapped, a prisoner to the unseen menace. As the hours dragged on, sleep eluded me. The darkness outside deepened, the walls pressing in as if to crush the very air from my lungs. I clung to the small details of the ceiling, using them as a lifeline to stave off the encroaching fear, knowing that dawn was still hours away. I couldn't bear another moment of this. Slowly, I lifted myself from the bed and made my way to the door, keeping my head still. Hunger had set in. I moved silently, cautiously crossing the cold car park to the glow of the vending machine. Inside, a variety of snacks looked faded from the sun. I pulled out a note and fed it to the machine, the normality of the action distracting me from turning around. The machine accepted the note, and I pressed the combination, awaiting something to take my mind off the dark. The spools spurred to life as the snack slid forward and then down. I bent down to retrieve it. That's when the chanting began. I turned slowly towards the sound, an uncomfortable twisting in my gut rising to my throat. Ahead, a gathering of people stood in a crescent shape inside the park by the motel, including the service worker and caretaker woman. They surrounded a small pile of random items, illuminated faintly by the park lights. Even from this distance, I could discern the silhouettes: a pair of glasses, a map, a wallet, and keys. The chant resonated through the still night, each syllable rolling off their tongues with a rhythm that felt both ancient and powerful. The words were guttural and melodic, filled with a haunting cadence that sent shivers down my spine. As the group circled the mundane items laid out in ritualistic precision, their voices rose and fell in a foreign, almost otherworldly harmony. The air seemed to vibrate with each intonation, weaving an invisible web of dread around me. My heart pounded and my skin prickled as if the very air was charged with dark energy. Though I couldn't understand the words, the intent behind them was clear. Summoning, binding, compelling. Fragments of the chant felt disturbingly familiar, echoing with the weight of forgotten rituals. Each phrase seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a dark promise, as if the chant itself was a living entity reaching out to ensnare any who dared listen. The figures began to turn. Despite being about 20 meters away, I unconsciously crossed the car park and stood by the street, now able to make out their faces as they surveyed me. Their wide smiles and mouths agape revealed what felt like too many teeth. The chant continued, their mouths twisting to form the sounds, yet their eyes betrayed terror. Pleading looks from all of them tore through me, screaming at me to leave now, but their welcoming bodies stretched wide, inviting me to cross the asphalt streets. The clash of emotions, fear, menace, and warmth, all fought one another to be the primary feeling. My mind almost acquiesced, the scratching ache of what was behind me pushing me forward. It beckoned me to join them. My body protested and screamed, the dread built as it sensed my thoughts. To turn and walk, I would step into abject horror. Forward was the loving call of familiarity. With a great, uncertain step, I turned my back on the gathering and walked back to our room. As I turned away from the gathering, my body protested violently. My heart sank, breaths long and deep. Each step back towards the motel felt like wading through molasses. An invisible force clawed at me, pulling me back towards the chanting group. The ache in my chest intensified as if something was trying to rip my soul from my body. My muscles tensed and strained with every movement. The chant almost engulfed me, surrounding me in a maw of alien chants. The distance to my room seemed to stretch interminably, the dim lights of the motel flickering in and out of focus, extremely bright in one moment and pitch black the next. Each step forward was a battle against an unseen force that grew stronger with every passing second. My mind reeled, assaulted by a barrage of whispered temptations and threats that made my skin crawl. I could feel the dark energy digging into me, its tendrils wrapping around my very essence, threatening to pull me apart. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and my vision blurred with the effort of resisting the pull. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest, urging me to turn back to the comfort of the gathering behind me. The door to our room was just ahead. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingers barely grazing the doorknob. I looked forward as I felt the door, but my consciousness felt miles away. Each touch of reality was such a distance. It bedraggled my mind. With a Herculean effort, I twisted the knob and stumbled inside, collapsing against the door as it swung shut behind me. Everything was quiet. The room was dark. The sight of Megan lying asleep on the bed brought everything into focus. My heart pounded in my ears, but I was slowly coming back to its senses. I looked around the dark room. I was here. Everything was back in its place. I strained again to hear the outside. Nothing. I paused and hesitated to look over my shoulder. Nothing. I turned and cautiously looked over my left shoulder to the door. Nothing. I locked the door slowly, made my way to the bed and crawled inside. I felt I wanted to say something to Megan or awaken her, but something held me back. The fear I felt before was distant, lingering in the back of my mind. The thought was different now. It was almost as though it would become real if I acknowledged what happened. I listened one more time, trying to make out any sense of what was outside. Nothing. I slid closer to Megan, wrapped tightly around her, and chose to forget. Sleep was not too far behind. I woke in a sudden panic. Upright, I observed the surroundings. The nice calm blue of the room was brightened by the subtle sun through the blinds. Morning had arrived, and Megan walked out of the bathroom brushing her teeth. "Sleep well?" she asked. I took a brief moment to stabilize myself and breathe deeply. "I think it's best we keep moving," I replied slowly. She smiled and made her way back into the bathroom. By the time she finished up, I had packed our bags and was walking out the door. "Why the rush?" She laughed. I didn't stop. I opened the door and noticed our vehicle where we had parked it. I loaded it up and was ready to leave. Megan climbed into the passenger side with a confused grin. I had started the car. "Why so sudden?" "I have to drop the key off, babe." I drove closer to the lobby. The shutters were still down. I pulled the handbrake and took the key from her hand. "I'll drop them off. Be 2 minutes." I got up and hurried to the chute. Glancing around, the park seemed normal in the light, but the ominous feeling lingered in the air. Keys deposited, I rushed to the car and slammed the doors shut, locking the doors for good measure. Megan rolled her eyes and sighed. With glances in the mirror and a careful foot, I made my way towards the highway and the open road. I kept checking. Every minute or so, I surveyed the town as we traveled. We were up pretty early for the cozy little town, which seemed deserted. It was not long until we had left the confines of Graysall and were back out through the woods. "You going to tell me what that was about?" Megan asked. I looked at her and feigned a nonchalant smile. Cozy little hideaway towns are not my thing. I'm keen for the big smoke, as they say. "So you didn't sleep?" I didn't know why I didn't tell her. Part of me wanted to keep the truth as a lie. I wanted to keep her safe from whatever that was. I sighed as I relented and opened up my thoughts. "Alright, so..." Another part of me screamed in terror as a rising feeling tingled my neck. I stopped myself again. A glance in the rearview mirror, and I could sense it again. It was behind me in the back, but all I could see was the back window and the suitcases lying on the seats. It was still here. I couldn't look again. I looked away from the mirror and straight ahead. "Yeah, average sleep," I hesitantly stated. "Are you okay?" I paused and nodded. Megan seemed to have accepted that answer and went back to idling. I wanted to say more. I was screaming in my mind, but it stopped me. The tension in the car was palpable, my mind racing with the events of the night before and what lingers behind us. Megan leaned back in her seat, quietly scrolling through her phone. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the unease in the pit of my stomach wouldn't let up. Minutes passed, and the silence between us grew heavier. The winding road seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees blurring into a monotonous green. Suddenly, a faint flash of red and blue lights appeared in the distance, reflecting off the rearview mirror. My pulse quickened, but I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look back. Megan shifted in her seat, noticing the lights as well. "Are those..." She trailed off, her voice tinged with concern. I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Probably just a routine check," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. The lights grew brighter, closer, casting an eerie glow inside the car. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the dread I felt deep inside. The urge to glance in the mirror was overwhelming, but I fought it, knowing that looking back might reveal more than just a police car. The siren blipped, a short, sharp burst that made me flinch. Megan turned to me, her eyes wide with worry. "What should we do?" "Just stay calm," I replied, though my own nerves were fraying. "I'll pull over." I eased the car to the side of the road, the lights now glaring in full force through the back window. My hands shook as I shifted the car into park and rolled down the window. The officer approached, his silhouette framed by the flashing lights. Megan's fingers brushed against my arm, a silent gesture of support. "Good morning," the officer said, his tone neutral but firm. "License and registration, please." "Of course, sir." I pulled out my license and the relevant paperwork from the glove department. I handed them over as he began to scrutinize. His mirrored glasses glared at me, forcing me to look away. "You know why I pulled you over, sir?" No, I don't." "Your tail light is out." "Oh, It's a rental. It was definitely good when we left New York. Yes, I can see that. A pause. I looked up as he continued to read the papers. His face was stern and aged, poring over each of the documents I handed him. Did you notice anything last night in town? I gripped the wheel in surprise. The itch and clawing returned, digging into my spine. Like what, sir? He looked at me. I felt my head move with strain to look at him. Something invisible, a dark presence, was gripping my head. Did you notice anything at all, sir? No noises, no strange occurrences? Another grip on my arm, this one from Megan. There was concern in her touch. I could feel her eyes on me, sensing something was wrong. No, nothing at all. Slept like a baby. The pause dragged on for too long. Each second felt like an eternity as the presence tightened its hold, sending waves of terror through my body. So, you're a foreigner, driving through this state in a car with a broken taillight that you hired from another state. He sighed audibly. Too much paperwork. He handed me the papers, which I gladly took, but they didn't move. He was gripping them tight as I tugged at them. You got anything to say to me, sir? My neck craned again, as if an unseen force was controlling my movements. My entire body was on fire from fear. My muscles ached as the invisible claws dug deeper into my shoulders. My eyes shook from the pain as my cheeks tightened, pulling further and further apart in a smile too large for my own face. Have a great day, sir. The policeman smiled widely back, almost in wicked greeting. His grin was unsettlingly familiar. And you have a great day too, sir. I used to like hiking. I say used to, because if I ever get out of here, I'm never doing it again. I live in West Virginia, and just about the only good things about it, really, are the nature and the folklore, so I've always spent as much time as I could outside. I've encountered some relatively weird stuff up until this point, so when I saw the staircase leading down into the ground in the middle of the woods, on the side of a mountain, it barely fazed me. In fact, it really intrigued me. You hear a lot of stories about feral people in the hills out here and all that, and they're the first thing I thought of. But I told myself that was stupid. None of that's real, and worrying about it shouldn't stop me from checking out something cool that I'd never seen before. So I, like the idiot I am, knelt down by the mysterious stairs in the woods. I used my phone flashlight to illuminate them, and saw an earthen tunnel that led down to a dead end, with little bits of rock and root sticking out. There was absolutely nothing else, but just seeing that wasn't enough for me. I figured there had to be more to it, had to be some reason the stairs were there, but it occurred to me that it might be some kind of trap. That as soon as I stepped down into it, someone might block the entrance. Even if feral people aren't really out here, I figured it couldn't hurt to be at least kind of careful. So, I stood back up and shouted for my friend Greg, who I'd left behind a little way down the trail because he had to use the bathroom. He shouted back that he was on his way and rushed up to me, and I showed him the stairs and asked him to keep a lookout while I investigated. He agreed, saying that it was weird and that I was crazy, but whatever, man. So I went down the stairs. There were about 15 of them, I poked around, searched the dirt walls for signs of secret entrances, messages, anything interesting. I found nothing. So I headed back up. About halfway up the stairs, I got hit by a really bad bout of dizziness, like a vertigo, and I had to stop because I almost fell backwards back down them. I kinda curled forward and closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, the light from above was much more dim, like the sky was clouded over, but there had been no clouds in the sky before. I climbed the rest of the stairs and found Greg there waiting for me, but he was different. I couldn't really place how. Part of it was the weird way he was staring at me, like blank and cold and shocked all at the same time. I was pretty sure he was wearing a different outfit than he'd been in before, but I was also pretty sure he hadn't brought a second one with him. And even if he had in case of an emergency, the idea that he'd just randomly changed clothes while I was down the stairs seemed really stupid. I wanted to ask him about it, but I couldn't bring myself to. I told him there was nothing down in the tunnel, and he didn't say anything back. Just kept staring. I asked him what was up, why he was being so quiet, whether something had freaked him out. He still didn't say anything. At this point, I figured he was messing with me, and it honestly upset me. I wasn't about to just stand there begging him to talk to me, so I started down the trail again, the way we'd been heading before. I had a really bad, weird feeling, obviously, and was just about done with everything. But we were far enough along the loop that it made more sense to keep going than to turn back. Greg walked behind me, and didn't talk the whole way to the lot. We'd ridden there together, in his car, but when we got to the parking lot, I didn't see it anywhere. In fact, the lot which I was positive had been paved was now just packed down dirt. The cars there all kind of looked old-fashioned, and I didn't recognize the logos on any of them. The trail was a simple loop. There should have been no way for us to end up in any other parking lot. So I was finally like, Greg, what's going on? But he just looked at me and still wouldn't open his mouth. Honestly, I had kind of a meltdown / breakdown / freak out. No matter what I said, Greg wouldn't respond. I think once I wore myself out, shock set in. I followed Greg to some weird blue car that looked like it was made in the 50s maybe. Got in. He pulled out onto a road that I didn't recognize. We passed houses and other buildings I had never seen in my life. All of them looked old-fashioned, but not old. When we passed signs, I didn't recognize the writing on them. Not just the language, but the writing itself was totally unfamiliar. Kind of like Russian, but also totally different than that. I guess I can't really describe it. That's when I figured I must be dreaming and calmed down a bit. Even though everything was way more realistic than any dream I've ever had, I could smell gas and pine trees and dirt. I felt grit sliding under my shoes on the floor mat. I pinched the side of my leg, and it hurt. By the time we pulled up to the building, I wasn't so sure I was dreaming anymore. I didn't recognize it. It was 3 stories, with some kind of butcher shop on the first floor and what looked like apartments above it. Then my mom stepped out the front door of the butcher shop, wearing a white apron. I got out and half jogged over to her. The instant I did, I saw that she was looking at me the same way Greg did, all cold and weird with her mouth clamped shut. I knew that if I said anything to her, she wouldn't answer. And past her, through the window of the butcher shop, there was some smoked meat hanging up. I don't want to say what it looked like it was from. I know how all this sounds already, and I was in a state of shock and panic. Besides, I couldn't bring myself to focus on it for too long. I walked past my mom, where there was another door beside the butcher one, up those stairs and into the apartment, or I guess townhouse above it. It felt kind of like I was on autopilot, like my feet were taking me there on their own. I still don't recognize anything. I'm so terrified and exhausted that I almost feel high. I've found a bedroom that obviously wasn't the master. That almost looks like it could maybe be mine, I guess. Got in and shut the door, locked it, and laid down on the bed. There are posters for movies in here that I've never heard of, with text I can't read. I pulled my phone out, and I still have service. I'm still connected to the internet, the normal internet that I can read. My mom and someone who sounds like my dad are standing outside the door talking. They aren't speaking English or any language I've ever heard. To be honest, I'm not even sure I should be calling it talking or speaking. They're clearly saying things to each other and answering each other, only it's like weird short sounds and a bunch of hissing interspersed with a few syllables here and there. I check the window, and there's no good way out or down. I'm on the 3rd floor, and there's a concrete sidewalk right below. Plus there's a guy standing there, staring up through the window, who looks exactly like me. I'm not sure when this numbness is going to fade, when I'll start freaking out again. I'm using the time I have while still being calm to find information on what could possibly be going on, and if there's a way for me to get back home without leaving this room. I don't think I can leave this room. My phone is low on battery though, and I don't know if I'll be able to charge it with anything here. If you've ever heard of anything like this, please tell me. I'll take any information I can get. Google's turning up nothing but stuff about stairs in the woods that lead upward. Nothing like this exactly. Pretty sure I can feel the panic coming back. The doorknob's jiggling now. They're trying to get in. I met my girlfriend, let's call her Diana, when I was living in a bustling city. She worked at the same office as I did. We had known each other for like a year or two when we started dating. She would tell me stories about her hometown and the paranormal activities that occurred there. She was one of those people who are deeply interested in the paranormal. I didn't believe her stories, because I didn't believe in paranormal stuff. She would always look so full of life whenever she talked about paranormal activities or stories she had heard from other people. After a few months since we started dating, she got a job at her hometown and moved there. I wanted to go there with her, but there were no job openings there. Not for the first few months, at least. I applied for a few jobs in her town, and finally was able to land one. I couldn't wait to see her again because I hadn't seen her for months. I remember how Diana and her family welcomed me with open arms when I first entered the town. They fed me delicious food at her home, and I formed bonds with her family. In addition to her parents, she had a little sister who was the world to her. Her sister was called Lily. She was a shy, quiet little girl who barely spoke to anyone. Diana had told me how often Lily got sick, and how no doctors knew what was wrong with her. Diana would tell me how she and her family thinks that something else was causing Lily to get sick so often. On that day when her family welcomed me, her dad Daniel took me into his room. I wondered what he was trying to do. "Son, I heard that you're going to live in this town," Daniel said, his gaze fixed on me. I nodded in response to his question. "Then there are rules that you must follow." Daniel cleared his throat. Do not fish at the pier past 12 a.m. in the night. Do not go into the woods past 9 p.m. And finally, do not go anywhere near the beach at the south at sunset. This final rule is one you must never break under any circumstances. I nodded, even though I didn't believe him. I believe that everything must have a scientific explanation, and paranormal stuff are made up by people as a way to pass time for entertainment. After that, I went back to dine with the rest of the family. The rest of the day went normal. Obviously, I couldn't stay at Diana's house, so I ended up renting a place close by to her place. We would go on dates occasionally, as I got used to her town. Even though I didn't believe her father, I avoided breaking the rules he mentioned out of respect for him. One day, when we were on a date at a local cafe, I brought up what her dad talked about with me, his list of rules. "Yeah," she said. "As long as you are not there at the times my dad mentioned, you're safe." I have to admit, the creepiness of those rules were getting to me. At first, I had thought that this was all a ploy by her dad to get me to break up with her. But seeing how she herself validated his rules, I wasn't so sure anymore. As I grew accustomed to the town, I would go to this beautiful beach to relax. I would use this swing in the woods that led to the beach. I could get a good view of the beach from there. There was always this one kind old lady, let's call her Matilda, who would talk to me whenever she saw me there. She would come there almost every evening to get wood to burn. I enjoyed those days. I enjoyed our conversations. She would tell me stories of the past, about the time when she was young, and every day, when sunset drew near, she would hurry home after telling me that I should not stick around longer, even though I would have done so without her telling me. And one day, when I was chilling on a bench at the beach at evening, I fell asleep. Because I had not slept well the previous night, I had a strange nightmare of an old man strangling me when I was on the bench and woke up. No one was there. It was quiet, with the sound of waves splashing. It was dark, with the clouds in the sky shaded with red. I looked at the time. It was already sunset. All of a sudden, I felt a chill run down my spine, like I wasn't alone. I quickly got back into the woods to go back home. As I was walking in the woods, I saw the old lady, the same one who had always talked to me in the distance. She was standing completely still, with her back turned. I didn't notice it until I got close enough to her. She had no feet, and she was hovering above the ground. She turned around to look at me. Her eye sockets were empty, and she was grinning from ear to ear. It wasn't humanly possible. The minute that happened, I heard sounds of women laughing from all directions. They sounded hysterical. I covered my ears and turned my eyes away from her, and then when I looked at where she was before, she was gone. I ran as fast as possible. The laughing voices were still there, echoing from all directions. Their volume didn't change no matter how far I went. I covered my ears and made my way towards home. The people on the street shot me weird glances, as though they were staring at someone who went insane. As soon as I entered my house, the laughing voices stopped. It was as quiet as it had always been. I went into my room and plucked the courage to look through the window. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I looked at the sunset sky and wondered if this was going to continue. At that point, Daniel's warnings replayed in my head. Don't go anywhere near the South Beach at sunset. I wondered if this was the bench that he talked about with me before. I was worried about what might come next. I stopped going to that beach, but the feeling was always there. I felt like something was watching me no matter where I went. Sometimes I would feel someone touching my shoulder or pull my clothes lightly, and no one would be there when I would turn around to look. I didn't tell Diana nor anyone about this. I believed that it was my burden, and my burden alone. I didn't see the old woman either, for days. Ever since this happened, I used my free time to walk around town. I didn't pay attention at the time, but I would never see the old woman when I walked around town. Many days passed this way, without further incident. One day, as I was going back home from work, I noticed the old lady standing there in the woods. She gestured me to come closer, but I was too afraid to go to her. She kept gesturing over and over, but I paid no heed to her. As I passed by her, I gave her a glance. She looked normal, like she usually does. I still couldn't get over how creepy she looked at sunset on the last day I saw her. Seeing how she looked normal, I told myself that whatever I saw and heard the other day must have been my imagination. As soon as I went up to her, she smiled. "Hey, Sonny," she said. "It's been a while since we last saw each other. How have you been doing?" "I've been fine, I guess," I answered. "Sonny, I have a present for you. Can you come with me?" The old lady eagerly asked. "Sure, I guess," I answered with a moment of hesitation. After gesturing me to follow her, she took me to her house in the town. It looked beautiful, as though it was built yesterday. It was filled with lights. Upon entering her house, I noticed that it was completely empty. "Do you live here alone?" I asked, my tone curious. "Yes, I have a few children, but they are all out of town," she answered. She led me into the living room and gestured me to wait. The house was well lit, with a lot of colorful, small lights. It looked as though the house was prepared for a party. Not too long after, she brought me a slice of chocolate cake. "Take a bite, Sonny," she said eagerly. Without wasting any time, I took a bite from the chocolate cake. But the minute I did that, it tasted like mud, and I instantly spat it out. The old lady was still there, observing me eagerly. She started laughing. "Sonny, take another bite," she said. "It tastes terrible," I said to her. She looked disappointed, and then she took the cake slice and went out to the living room. I was puzzled as to why the cake tasted like mud, when it was clearly a chocolate cake. I still had the bad taste of it in my mouth. It was enough to make me feel extremely nauseous. I couldn't stay there any longer, so I went out of the house and rushed towards mine. I was getting weird looks from people on the street again, like I was an insane person. I couldn't stop to think about it at the time because I was too nauseous. As soon as I got back home, I vomited in my bathroom on the toilet. I didn't look at it and flushed the toilet. My whole body felt weak, as though I had a bad fever. I laid down on my bed to rest and fell asleep briefly. I woke up from my phone ringing. It was Diana calling me. I picked up. "Babe, are you okay?" Diana sounded worried. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just feeling a bit nauseous, that's all. I'm feeling better now," I said without thinking. "That's good," she said as though she didn't believe me. I sensed that there was something odd. She was unusually silent and didn't say anything for a while. "Babe, please, tell me the truth," she said with a serious tone. "What were you doing at the graveyard?" A chill went down my spine. I was genuinely puzzled at her words. I didn't go to any graveyard. What? I didn't go to the graveyard since I came to this town, I said, genuinely confused. Babe, a lot of people saw you at the graveyard eating dirt, she told me. You left before anyone could intervene. Hearing this chilled me to my core. Was I losing my mind? Was I actually eating dirt in the graveyard? Or did people mistake me for someone else? Recalling what happened in the past, I came to the conclusion that what my girlfriend was telling was the truth. We talked a bit more, and she genuinely sounded worried. After that, she hung up the phone. On the next day, as I finished work, Daniel called me and asked me to come as soon as possible, so I went there. I knocked on the front door and Diana opened it. She looked worried. She gestured me to come in, so I went in. She led me into the living room and had me sit down on the couch. She sat right next to me and held my hand tight. A few moments later, Daniel entered the living room and sat down next to Diana. So, son, he started, I hear that you did some questionable things in the graveyard. There was silence in the air. I hesitated to talk. Well, Daniel broke the silence. Because this happened, you must have stayed on the south beach at sunset. He was right. I nodded. His expression changed to a slightly angry one. Son, he said, I told you clearly, do not stay at the south beach at sunset. I explained to him what had happened to me there in full detail, as well as everything that happened between me and the old lady. I see. You've been seeing this old lady almost every evening? Daniel asked. Yes, I answered. What did she say her name was? Daniel asked. Matilda, I answered. Daniel's eyes widened. I looked at Diana. She had the same reaction. There was silence for a few moments. Son, Daniel replied, Matilda died years ago. She's my mother, and she is Diana's grandmother. It shocked me to my core. I couldn't believe it. This meant that the old lady I was talking to all along was Diana's grandmother? Questions popped up in my head, one after the other. Why did the old lady lie about her children being far away if she was a ghost? Was she evil or something? So that's the shape it took, huh? Daniel said, as though he was talking to himself. What do you mean? I asked him. That nasty thing. It's not real. She's not real. That is only one shape among many others that nasty thing takes. Daniel said. Even my daughter Lily. Daniel suddenly stopped. It's okay, Dad. Diana reassured him, holding his hand. My daughter Lily, Daniel continued. That thing is tormenting her too. We only realized it recently. I was shocked. So the thing that has been causing Lily to get sick all the time was that thing. Almost right at that time, Lily entered the room. She looked at me and smiled. Mr. Humpty likes you, big brother, Lily said to me. Mr. Humpty wants big brother to hang out with him. Come. Before I could answer, Lily was pushed away by an unseen force. She had started struggling against something on the ground. It was as though something invisible was trying to strangle her. Before we could reach her, she stopped. She had passed out. Daniel took her in his arms as he cried. He was whispering something that I couldn't quite make out. After that, he went out of the room. I could see Diana covering her face with her hands, crying. I tried to console her the best I could. When she finally calmed down, I asked her to tell me everything. She told me what happened. They were having a barbecue in the evening near the woods with their neighbors. Lily was playing with a few girls her age. When they took their eyes off Lily, she disappeared into the woods. They searched for her all over the place, only to find her standing still at the south beach at sunset. She had been acting like that ever since that event. She would get frequently sick and would not be able to get out of the house. According to Diana, they were a safe distance away from the south beach. She had no idea how Lily went to the south beach through the woods. There was no doubt in my head about it. Lily went through the same thing I did. Diana also told me that people who have been targeted by the entity see it in different forms. For me, it was in her grandmother's form. For Lily, it was someone/something else. Diana told me that someone was brutally murdered by some thugs at the South Beach at sunset nearly 40 years ago. I knew what she was getting at. It was his vengeful spirit that was haunting the South Beach. Obviously, it was a lot for me to take in. My entire world has changed within a span of a few days. Above all, I knew that whatever that thing wasn't done with me. Deep in my heart, I wished that thing would leave me alone. As much as I didn't want to believe that it was real, I did. I wondered why others were fine, even though they went to the South Beach at sunset. Why Lily? To this day, I'll never know. Diana didn't seem to have any answers either. In the following days, the activity intensified. I would hear distant laughing, talking nearly every time I went outside. Activity started happening everywhere except my home. The other day, my coffee mug was pushed by an unseen force, breaking it to pieces when it hit the floor. Another time, I would see shadow figures moving at humanly impossible speeds. So I reduced the time I spent outside. My contact with Diana was very limited. I couldn't pick up her calls, even though I knew she was worried. My mind was just too occupied with the activity that was happening to me. The activity at my workplace worsened as I stopped going outside, except when I had to work. The shadow figures I would see in my workplace evolved into unnatural entities. One particular day, as I was working past the normal hours, without anyone else but me, I caught something in the corner of my eye. In a cubicle in the same row as mine was a shadow-like face with no features except for its gigantic eyes. Only half of its face was visible. I jolted, as if noticing. My movement, it put its head back in the cubicle it was in. It was only there for a moment. I didn't take my eyes off the cubicle it was in, and went up to that cubicle. To my surprise, it was empty. I was too scared at that point, so I was about to go home. As I reached the exit, I saw a creature. The same creature from before with its gigantic eyes. This time its face was visible. It was a distorted face. Its body was like a bodybuilder's. It had 8 legs that were on its human-like torso. It looked very much like a spider. Upon seeing it, I heard hysterical women laughing from all directions. At least, this is the thing I remember before fainting. On early morning the next day, I woke up in the graveyard without knowing how I went there. I looked at the visible parts of the street. There was no one around. Figures, since it was early in the morning after all. I quickly hurried towards my house, my body aching with pain. After reaching my house, I decided to call someone. Anyone who can help me. I reached for my phone in my pockets, only to realize that it was gone. I was too scared to be outside, so I couldn't afford to go back and search for my phone. So I went inside my house and took a shower. The weight that I had felt the whole time was gone as soon as I entered my room. That was when I noticed the wounds on my body. There were scratches and bruises everywhere. What happened to me last night? I wondered. Still, the image of the spider-like creature lingered in my head. Those gigantic eyes, the distorted face. If possible, I never wanted to see that creature again. After showering, I lay on the bed thinking. Not too long after, I heard knocks on the door of my room. I opened the door. It was Diana. She looked very worried and sad. She asked me to tell her everything about what has been happening to me. So I did. She called her dad and told him the whole story. She and her dad offered to help me with this situation, and I accepted gratefully. I had heard that Lily went through this similar experience, and with the help of some exorcists, it is not as intense anymore. Ever since that, I haven't gotten out of my house much. I'm currently taking leave from work. Thank God for vacation leave. I've seen a few exorcists, but my condition hasn't improved. Every time I go out of my house, I see that spider-like creature in the shadows, looking at me. Sometimes it disappears. Other times, it runs towards me with inhuman levels of speed and I would faint, only to wake up with scratches all over my body. Oh, and I also figured out that staying in my house keeps it away, so I am spending more and more time in my house. Diana is helping me with food and errands. Thank God I have such a wonderful girlfriend like her. I'm too scared to go outside anymore. At the same time, I'm wishing to be rid of this curse, ghost, spider, or whatever it is. So I'll remain in my safe haven until exorcists are able to get rid of this entity. A woman came through the drive-thru a while back. Not in a vehicle or anything, just walked up to the window. Which happens. Sometimes people on walks will just come up and buy something. It's even more common since we've had our dining room closed most nights. But I just can't shake this woman from my head. I didn't think she seemed out of place. Not physically. Drive-thrus get all types of people. I mean, some people really stick with you because of how strange they are. Like a man yelling at me because I handed his girlfriend her soda too aggressively. This woman wasn't like that. She was remarkably average. She looked middle-aged, Midwestern, a blouse on with a cross just a bit too big, and hair straight out of the 80s. She had asked for a small vanilla shake and a small fry, paying with a crumpled up bill. She told me to keep the change, grabbed the food, and walked away into the woods behind the store. But before she left, I think she kissed me. Just my hand, not like a full kiss or anything, but her mouth grazed against my hand when I was passing her the food, just for a second, and I can't get that out of my head. For all intents and purposes, she should just be another customer in a long line of customers I serve every day. She wasn't even particularly unusual, but these past few nights, I feel like I can't sleep, like she's stuck somewhere behind my eyelids. After that night, seeing her, I began having issues. For one, I started seeing bugs on my skin. It was probably due to the lack of sleep, but I'd seen them in the corner of my eyes, crawling against my arm. They weren't there. When I really looked and focused my eyes, they'd be gone. It always made me feel on edge. Just the thought of a bug on me makes my skin crawl. Sometimes I would find myself absent-mindedly scratching a spot that I'd seen a bug before. It would help that skin-crawling feeling go away. At least sometimes. I think my coworkers chalked it up to addiction. A lot of them had gone through it themselves, and always treated me extra nice if I had a bad itching day. I thought it was sweet, even if they didn't know my real problem. I'd also been losing time, mostly when I'd work the back window, away from everyone else. It would get worse at night, too. I'd find myself in the deep freezer, or sweeping the floor, closing up for the night when I wouldn't even remember it getting dark outside. I really didn't mind it much, though. Sometimes it would be nice to not have to work a full shift. Surprisingly, given my state, the general manager was talking about promoting me to shift manager. It was an exciting prospect. It means no more wearing a hat and apron, more responsibilities, but sadly no pay raise. I'd still be happy even without a pay raise, but one of the responsibilities of the job is to inventory the downstairs freezer. Normally I wouldn't have to go down there. The only thing they keep down there is frozen buns that the managers bring up to thaw daily. But soon it would be my job too. Most fast food chains don't have basements. It's entirely impractical. But since our chain replaced a family-owned company, we strangely have one. It's a large space, unfinished, always wet, dimly lit, somehow always a dark shade of green. You can't turn on the lights until you're at the bottom of the stairs, and even then the light comes from singular bulbs on strings that barely illuminate the room. It was eerie, and I dreaded having to do inventory alone, so killing two birds with one stone, I switched to day shifts. The doctor thinks it would be best. Something about my circadian rhythm being messed up by working at night. After switching shifts, I found that I really liked it. Opening early in the morning has a strange sort of magic to it. The quietness is peaceful, and the sun always streams into the building, sometimes making little rainbows on the caked grime-covered floors. My sleep improved, and the imaginary bugs went away. My arms finally get a chance to heal. Now crisscrossed with bandages to keep the oozy patches contained. I felt refreshed. Even going down into the basement doesn't affect me that much anymore. Just knowing that the sun is out and shining keeps her from my thoughts. At least it had until last week, when I saw her again. It had been a few months on the day shift, and I was about to leave for the night to go home, and suddenly she was there, inside the building, waiting for me at the cash register, her nails tapping against the plastic countertop. She was taller than me, domineering. She frightened me, staring at me expectantly with eyes so radiantly blue they seemed to glow. "Ma'am, our inside dining area is closed for the day, but we can help you through the drive-thru," I had said. "You aren't working nights anymore." Her voice was deeper than I had anticipated, fuller, scratchy, like a heavy smoker. It didn't match her physical appearance at all. Taking a closer look at her, she seemed sick, her eyes reddish, her nose running. Her skin flushed a dark pink. She was shiny with sweat. "No, ma'am," I had replied. The hairs on the back of my neck bristled as she moved closer, leaning over the counter. "I miss seeing you," her voice taking on a warm note, like salted caramel. I wanted to curl up in it, breathe her in. She reached her hand over the counter to place it over mine. I could feel the sweat of her palm as it lay clammy against me. I jerked it back, startled, looking down at my hand, strangely assessing it for injury. By the time I looked back up at her, she was gone, no trace left behind. I tried to go to sleep that night, but couldn't. She haunted me. She said she missed seeing me, and I worried that might be true. I didn't think I had seen her at all since that one night when she kissed me. Had I missed something? I tried closing my eyes, counting sheep, willing myself to sleep, and I couldn't stop the thoughts racing around my head. That, and my hand really itched. I dreamed of the woods behind the store, dense with foliage, brush untamed, holding on to bits of paper wrapper and plastic bags. It appeared almost like the leftover remains of a meal trapped on the teeth of a wooden beast. I saw her, her body tucked within that maw, her skin even sicker, draped around her like melting candle wax. Her eyes, the lit flame. Her hair had slunk off, her eyelids hung against her cheeks. She held out a hand for me, her fingers dripping blood, flesh drooping against bone. The forest mouth seemed to open, hinging back, displaying her like a pearl in an oyster, like a red tongue in a mouth. She stepped, tree branches catching on her skin, ripping it like wet tissue paper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but in ways dreams are so often, I couldn't move. I felt her get closer. I could feel that horrible sensation, my skin rebelling against me, itching. She stood a mere foot away from me, grabbing at her own melting visage, shifting it, molding it like warm putty. Finally, she lifted it back, moving it almost like taking off a hood, revealing her face. I woke. Morning shifts got worse. My sleep schedule got thrown off again. I started itching, seeing things in the corner of my eyes, not just bugs anymore. My coworkers really started to worry. My doctor says I need medication, but it takes weeks to start being effective. I don't know how long I can keep going like this. I hear things now too. I hear her in the basement. She whispers to me. She wants me to come back at night, to stay until sunset. She says she has wonderful things to show me. The bugs aren't on my skin anymore. They're in it. I can feel them moving, separating skin from flesh. As much as I scratch, I can't seem to get them out. My arms are a landscape of open wounds, scabs, and raw tissue. I've been trying to wear long sleeves, but I can't stop pulling them up to itch. Customers have started treating me with disgust. I was pulled aside today by the general manager. They're thinking about firing me if I don't get any help. I can't explain that I'm beyond help, that she has me. I'm hers now. My coworkers say there used to be a woman that would come up to the window each night once I switched to day shift and ask if I was there. She stopped coming. My coworkers don't know what happened to her, but I do. She's in the building, tucked under the stairs of the basement, waiting for me to stay just long enough for the sun to set. I can see her down there every morning, peeking at me while I count the number of rye loaves and burger buns. The coworkers think we have a mouse infestation. Something keeps eating our leftover cookies and frosted turnovers. But I know the truth. She just has a sweet tooth. It's getting colder outside. I know she can't get me in the sun, but the days are getting shorter. One day I'm going to leave too late, and I know she'll have me. She showed me what she really looked like today, when she takes off her skin. In my dream I never saw it, but right before I left for the day I went down there, rolling her a chunk of raw cookie dough from the freezer. I don't want her contaminating the customer's food while searching for a sweet treat. She pawed almost into the light, reaching for the dough. and I saw her fleshless hand. "Turn off the lights, love," she whispered to me. I shook my head, my resolve weakening. She came out into the light further, her eyes glowing cat-like in the darkness. "I want you to see me," she whispered. Despite myself, I switched off the basement lights. The room went dark, inky black. She emerged from her den behind the stairs, and I saw her horrible, tremendous self, a display from a Grey's Anatomy book, muscles, tendons, ligaments on full display. I see her even writing this now, her eyes eternally open, her blood pooling around her feet, her flesh tender. She holds open her arms towards me like a lover. She says she wants me. I am her chosen. She won't leave without me. I can feel my skin pull from me, flesh yearning for escape from its prison. It wants her too. I don't know how much longer I can resist. I let her touch me in that basement, just my hand. She kissed it again, purposefully this time. I can feel my tissue pull away, like a hangnail that doesn't stop, a whole finger unsheathed from its flesh. I type with it now. Every nerve ending feels born again, sensation free of the dulling of skin. I think I'll go back tonight, let her run her hands against me, and feel as my skin slides free, born anew.